And we're starting. It's up and running now. Hey guys, my name is Robert.
I'm Chad.
This is Bray Realty. You're on podcast number 2. So, yeah, podcast number 2. This one took a little bit of time, technical difficulties, huh? Right?
Fun
to
stuff.
the point. What? We almost were done with this one probably 3 times, and then we had to redo it. But it's all good. We're here. We're ready for you guys. So what's our topic today?
Today we're going to be talking about contingencies.
Contingencies. Why'd we want those?
Right. Well, I would say first, it's good. It's nice to understand that what a contingency is.
Yeah.
Really.
And the purpose behind it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, why we want to talk about them.
Exactly. It's essentially just a safety clause, right? That is a part of the sales contract that really protects the buyers. If anything important were to change.
Yeah. So It's kind of like, I want to buy your property, but there's some areas that if I get into this, if I open up this can of worms and it's rotten, I need an out, something that I believe that you're selling your property the way you think you're selling it. But what if I find mold in the basement? What if I find this issue with it? What if there's a lien that you didn't know about that wasn't paid 5 years ago?
What if I can't get the loan approved?
Yeah. Safety clauses. I like the word there.
It essentially just means this deal only moves forward if X happens.
And that's pretty straightforward stuff. I'm sure everybody listening here, why do we want to talk about it? Well, because season's getting hot again, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're about to have more bidding wars on the properties we want most, right? So this is more going to be towards the buyers that we're talking about here. Sellers, you can definitely tune in to understand the way we want our buyers thinking and the way I would argue buyers should be thinking when it comes to making a competitive offer. Not an offer on a property, competitive offer, right? So I would argue traditionally a buyer is going to go in thinking $300,000 property, I'm making an offer. $310,000 is $10,000 more. That sounds pretty good. The seller should take it, right?
Well,
right.
What are the rest of the terms?
Yeah, so that's what we kind of want to get into. $310,000, $10,000 more than asking price isn't as beautiful as it can be sometimes, and that's due to contingencies. And the average contract has 3 to 5 contingencies on it, almost off a limb, right? And most of them.
About 80% of home purchase contracts include.
Where is that data from?
That was from the NAR.
NAR, okay. So National Association of Realtors.
Yep. In August, I think that was August 2025.
So it was last year, but clean data, right?
Clean data.
On average, 80% of contracts submitted.
Actually, a little bit over, but yes.
Yeah, have contingencies on them.
At least one.
Yeah, at least one. So your average offer coming in on a property, 80% chance it has contingencies. And that's counting the properties that are, in foreclosure, are maybe completely gutted and just complete tear down. And these people are coming in. They're like, I'm not going to have any contingencies on this one because we already know there's no point. I'm buying a piece of land with a rusted piece of property on it. Those obviously wouldn't have contingencies in them. And this stat that you're giving is counting those properties. So in your traditional residential world, it's going to be even higher chance, I would argue in the 90s, that you're going to see a contingency, at least one on there. So Chad, you wrote down a couple different contingencies that we kind of wanted to run through. I feel like you guys could get the ideas and the understandings of what these contingencies entail. So instead, we're going to dig into our opinion, what we think when we see this contingency on our offers for our sellers, and then the way the buyers and the buyer's agents should be thinking when they're putting these contingencies on their offer. And even more so, if they have to.
Right. So again, what is a contingency? It's essentially a safety clause that protects the buyer if anything major or important were to happen.
Yep.
Specific examples of that, again, an inspection report or the condition of the home, if that's not exactly what was it.
So let's run through the main 5 just to keep organized.
Yeah, of course. So we have inspection contingency.
Yep.
We have finance contingency.
Okay.
We have appraisal contingency, which falls under the umbrella of
financing contingency.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have title.
Clear title contingency, yeah.
And then depending on, the type of offer or your situation, you might have a home sale or a
Contingency of sale, contingency of close.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
Or
These are all-
contingency of me buying another property, but that's usually on the seller side.
Exactly.
We're
And
sticking
those,
on the
I would
buyers.
say, are by far the most common that we will see.
And of course, one of the other most common is going to be, we don't got to get into this one as much, but occupancy contingency.
Sure.
Got to have a past occupancy inspection so I can take it to your municipality and get clear occupancy permit.
That'll be more dependent on the county that you're in too as well.
And those are so common, they're usually just written into most pre-made contracts. So yeah, let's go back, start out. Which one did you start with?
We have, well, probably the most common is the inspection contingency.
Inspection contingency. We all know what those are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're buying a house, you definitely should.
Yeah. So between 2021 and 2023, there's a lot of waived inspection contingencies. If you're a first-time home buyer, I highly recommend not waiving that contingency, because that is the purposeful out that if I find rotten worms in this can I open up, I can opt out of this contract or renegotiate at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So describe your most basic and common inspection contingency, at least in the state of Missouri. It might be different in other states.
Sure. So usually when a contract is officially accepted, meaning that the seller's accepted an offer that, you know, your buyers wrote or a buyer writes, it usually includes what they call an inspection contingency, which states you usually have about 5 to 10 days, more normally 10 days.
Okay.
Right now, you have 10 days as the buyer to do your own diligence, to hire a professional inspector to come out.
Yep.
And one inspector, too, depending on how many you wish to have, right, to go inspect the property. And they're going to give you a professional opinion on that specific condition of the property.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
And within that 10-day period, or before that 10-day period is up, you, as the buyer, have the option to either, well, you will review the report. If there's any findings that you may not like or may be of concern, you either have the option to either walk away from that 10-day contract and get your earnest money back, because you're doing it within the terms of the contract, and or what we really like to do and what
Renegotiate, right?
Renegotiate. Use it as a tool to negotiate.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Point of this conversation is not to identify what an inspection contingency is, but more importantly, what an inspection contingency means to the seller, right? We go back to the idea of that comparison, $300,000 property asking price. You're going to make a $310,000 offer. If you have an inspection contingency on there and somebody comes along and makes a plain $300,000 offer alongside you and they don't have an inspection contingency, which one would I choose? I'd be more motivated to choose the one without the inspection contingency, because you got a 10-day period. Traditionally 10 days. It could be even longer. In the state of Illinois, it's 20 days, right?
Or as a good negotiation piece, you can shorten it.
Yeah, and do keep in mind, this can all be rewarded. We're talking about the traditional contracts that are pre-written, because agents themselves, we don't write the contracts. You know, licensed attorneys write these contracts for us. But the traditional contingency is going to be 10 days in the state of Missouri, and that's 10 days of you as a seller sitting there being like, if they find anything they don't like, right? I can't access the sewer. There's a weird moisture. I don't know if it's moisture in the wall, but I'm just not comfortable with it. I'm opting out. These things have happened, and they're not attractive. In my eyes, I'd be willing to sacrifice $10,000 to go for the gentleman that or the lady that's choosing to opt out of inspection contingency. Now, don't get me wrong. Once again, we as professionals definitely recommend that a first-time home buyer or a traditional home buyer gets an inspection contingency put in, and you run through the inspection process, because these are, you know, plus $100,000 products we're purchasing. But to the seller, it's definitely unattractive, and we need to understand the value behind that. Personally, when it comes to that $300,000, I'd choose the $300 asking price over the person with the inspection contingency, right?
I mean, unless as the seller, right, you're very confident in the product that you're offering, right?
Yes,
you know
true.
Every single detail behind
Very
that
true.
home. You know the exact condition of that whole home.
Agreed.
That may be a situation where that $310,000, right? But it's all very situational.
So true.
It's very situational.
Yeah. No, it is exactly. That's why I can't really give a number. And I would be like, in this situation, maybe. But yeah, that's kind of the justification of that contingency. And it doesn't mean that if that buyer comes to you, or if you as the buyer go to the seller and say, hey, I want like this repaired, I want access to have this done, and I want you to get in further understanding of the roof because of these damages that were inputted, you don't have to go through with it, right? You could negotiate right back, hey, we're not touching a thing. We either end this contract or we move forward. And I've been in plenty of deals where, we go back to the buyer representing as the seller, and we're like, hey guys, unfortunately, like, we're not doing any of that. Holy cow, what? We're not even entertaining one thing, right? Now that's a whole nother idea. We're not going to get into the idea of negotiation.
You understand your market, but of course, that is a strong tool.
And the buyer's like, okay, we're still comfortable with your product, and we're going to move forward with it, and we're going to take these risks, or we're going to take these burdens that we take on. And of course, we've had situations where they come to you with several different issues, and you're like, okay, those are reasonable issues. I didn't know that about the roof. I didn't know that about the sewage. I'll give you so-and-so amount of money to credit towards those instead of repairing those. What do you think? And you'll either take it off the asking price of the property, or you can put it towards closing costs at the allowance of the lender, right? Or if you're paying
a lot of different ways to work around it, and
100%.
That's part of the art of negotiation.
Right? Yeah.
Not the best ways to go. I do want to throw out an interesting stat that I was reading, coming from the NAR once again. In this past January 2026, only 12% of buyers waived their inspection contingency, which was down from about 18% last year. What do you think about that?
So, I mean, we're getting back into a healthy market, right? Things are getting healthier for buyers. The flamboyant environment of the previous buying, selling market where just houses shot up in value, shot up in price, buyers were taking what they can get. It's less competitive now, so buyers have a little bit more option, right? So I'm not surprised to see it drop down, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it drop down even more, You said, just to be clear, they are adding the inspection contingency, or they're waiving it.
There less buyers are waiving their inspection contingency now.
Cool. Yeah. And it makes perfect sense. It's less competitive, And once again, we get back to the situation we're talking about here, right? How competitive do you want your offer to be? Well, if you're going to buy a property and there's only one other buyer and they both have inspection contingencies, there's no point in waiving it, right? Unless you want to get really competitive. But an inspection contingency, once again, in my eyes, can be worth thousands of dollars. And if you're making an offer on a property and you want to put numbers to it, $310,000 could become $300,000 valuation of an offer just because of an inspection contingency.
Absolutely.
Right? So important to know on that point. What's our next one on there?
Next one is finance contingency,
all right,
which is another very, very common one. Most your average American is taking out a loan, or getting some sort of mortgage, utilizing a bank to purchase these. Not all these buyers are coming in with cash offers.
Yeah.
Right. And when you do get a loan from a bank, what's typically included?
Yeah. So they want their stuff done, right? Most loans are, they have to go by these resale requirements of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and a couple other secondary markets. And we can get into those. We'll probably interview a couple lenders to dig into those details, but they have certain requirements that those secondary markets want in order to resell to those. On the basis, your average lender from that is, if it's I guess we got the 4 traditional loans on a residential property: conventional, FHA, VA, and USDA, right? So on your average, any one of those loans, they're going to require an appraisal rider, which is a contingency, and that's just basically the understanding behind, if I'm going to give this gentleman or lady a certain amount of money and I'm going to use so-and-so as a backup or an asset to, in case that their ability to pay me back this money falls through, I better make sure that asset values at least to some stake that value. So I always bring it to the idea of, like, if Chad wanted me to buy a watch, or wanted to buy a watch, and he finds a gentleman and he's like, this is a $12,000 Rolex, and I'll give it to you for $10,000. Chad comes to me and he's like, hey, Rob, can I borrow $10,000? I got this Rolex and it's worth $12,000. Chad's not a Rolex professional. I don't know if that gentleman's a Rolex professional, but even worse, even if they were, they're both biased parties, right? So I might want to have a third party that's non-biased come in, review the Rolex to confirm that it's at least worth $10,000, right? And then at that point, I'm like, all right, I'm comfortable giving you this money, Chad, because if you can't pay me back, I can have your Rolex, right? And then I at least have some kind of not as liquid but tangible item that I can recoup my losses on. So that's the same idea.
And basically coming down, you better make sure your offer price is at least close to appraisal value, unless, because if it comes in low.
Yeah, so that's a good detail. I want you to go over that as soon as I wrap up the idea, right? So the appraisal contingency or appraisal rider that has to go with the loan is basically we're hiring a professional appraiser who is third party to all this in the transaction. He or she comes in and basically says, this property is worth this much, and if it's worth that much, the bank is happy to give the buyer the money for that property, along with a couple other contingencies they sometimes require. But what happens if it doesn't worth?
Well, if it comes in high, that's great. That's great for everyone. I would argue maybe not for the seller, but
if you've ever been a buyer, that's where you hear the word extra equity, or you got equity in this property.
$5,000 extra equity.
Yeah, if it valued at $305,000 in the example property we're using.
Yeah, but if it comes in low, then that's where the real issue happens, because then you're back to the drawing board.
Negotiations.
Right? Let's just say it does come in $10,000 low. The property's $300,000. The appraisal comes in at $290,000. Well, you got a few options there. A, you have that appraisal contingency that's protecting you. If you wanted to, you could walk away.
Fair enough.
Or you can go back to the negotiation table, right?
Yeah.
And you can, again, negotiate. If you as the buyer feel comfortable and can't afford it, you can come up with that $10,000 because it's coming out of your pocket.
It's coming out of your pocket,
If not, either have the sellers take on that cost, or,
by decreasing the value of the property,
purchase price, and or you guys some way negotiate that out.
And usually those are the three. And as to a seller, that's once again a pretty unattractive thing to receive when you're looking at a sales contract and you're like, man, it's got a financing contingency, so it's definitely, there it is. It's got an appraisal rider, right?
And that goes back to the point of, why you shouldn't, and especially if you're getting a loan, right?
Yeah.
Offer way over the actual value, other than it being a very competitive situation.
Yeah.
Right?
So you got this $300,000 property. Gentleman comes in. I'm getting a loan on approved for $400,000, and I'm going to give you all that $400,000. It seems attractive, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, appraisal comes in. Yeah, it's worth $310,000. Mm-hmm. You're like, oof. I turned down this other cash buyer, right? So the cash buyer for so-and-so. And that's not even talking about the full encompassment of the financing contingency, right?
Absolutely.
There's still more to come with that.
Oh, yeah. Because not only does the bank want to make sure that your house is, or the property you're purchasing is valued at what they're giving you, but also if there's a property in some ways that can be, and I'm talking really about insurance.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So,
no lender's going to give you money these days. A traditional loan is going to give you money unless you can insure that property, right?
Yes, because let's just say you accidentally burn your house down, or it accidentally, something major happens to it.
Yep.
The bank needs to ensure that it is insured, because they're still, they're still giving out that money, and they're still owed that money.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, again, making sure that the house can and will be able to be insured, and of course the lender will also make sure that you can afford whatever that premium may be.
Yeah. So I'm like looking at it this way. I had a property we wanted to invest in on Salina Street, and the biggest issue was the roof. There was a lot of leaks running through the roof, and if you guys don't know, insurance companies have been having a lot of issues with roofs, particularly in Illinois and the St. Louis side of Missouri, due to the fact of hail, right? So they're very skeptical when it comes to roofs and roofs on properties. I've even had ones that are like, hey, if it's a new roof, we're still iffy about insuring it. And that was one of the biggest issues, right? I had to get a loan to buy this property. and I wasn't able to get a loan unless I can insure it. And I wasn't able to insure it unless I could figure out how to handle this roof with leaks in it, right? Properties, an insurer is not going to insure that with the thought that that roof could cave in, cause more issues, and they're going to have to pay for it on my behalf. So yeah, no, you're right on the money there. You end up pulling in another contingency accidentally by getting a financing contingency, and that's being able to get the property insured. Now, that being said, if it's a traditional home sale, not a big deal. Not a huge ordeal to get that property insured, but, if you have flood insurance, if you're near a lake and you have to get flood insurance, or there's other issues that have happened to the property and it carries over on what insurers call a clue report, it might raise your rates tremendously. And that buyer's like, holy cow, I can't pay $400 a month for insurance. So if I can't afford $400 a month on insurance, this lender's not going to give me money, right? Give me my loan. And even on top of that, the lender also qualifies you on the mortgage, which holds home insurance. So if that shoots you above your monthly there, which we can dig into, but it's going to be too chaotic to get here.
Oh, yeah.
Just know financing contingency is another big thing. And if you're coming in as a cash buyer, offer me $310,000 with a financing contingency, even if it's conventional, which is, of the four major, probably the buyer's most or the seller's most coveted loan. But of those, I would argue I'd still take the guy that's offering at asking price $10,000 less, all cash, right? Because, he can close quicker, he's got less contingencies, and he's got less requirements that I'm going to have to jump through. So good to think about. What else do we got?
Well, next is your title. Making sure that the title is clear.
Yeah, and that's a pretty regular practice. I would argue title is never going to change my mind about anything. Unless I was selling a property that I maybe flipped and I bought it foreclosed from a bank, because the previous title insurance that I had to use through that was special, or not general warranty, it's special warranty title insurance. And that basically means just the bank is, the title insurance is accountable for what happened when the property was in the bank's possession. So any previous owners, if they have any liens that run with the property, somebody repaired something, somebody built a deck.
Stays with the property.
Stays with the property, yeah. And I'd have to worry about the new buyer finding that out because I bought this property from the bank under special warranty. Traditional title insurance on a residential home is going to be called general warranty deeds, right? And that's basically the title company comes along and says, hey, we're going to investigate the beginning of this property. Everybody who's owned it, they call it chain of title. We're going to go all the way from, John Doe to Jane Doe at the end and how it transferred through. And they're going to clean up any opportunities if there's name mishaps. And they're also going to identify all, liens, any problems that I would like to say might come knocking at your door a couple years from now after you own this property. Absolutely. For so-and-so. And the reason they're motivated to do that is because it's insurance, right? If they don't find something like a lien, $500 lien from somebody who built a deck 10 years ago, and they don't notice that, and everything closes, and this guy comes knocking on your door a year from now, you can go to your title insurance and be like, hey, guys, I bought insurance from you, and this lien took place before my ownership and before my purchase of your insurance, and you guys unfortunately missed it. Title insurances, they take on that
as they should.
burden.
It shouldn't have been.
And let me tell you, it's hard to find a bad title company. They're all pretty good out here. We use a few that we trust, but it's more for the objective of we know the individuals that work there, so we could kind of call them up real quick and be like, fix my problem, right? So, but yeah, when it comes to title insurance, it's definitely wise to get what you would call a general warranty deed that's going to cover you all the way back. And if you see that properties aren't being sold on a general warranty deed, that's a negative, right? So, but arguably, I think it's healthy to move on to the next one and say, in my eyes, if I see a $310,000 with title insurance request and a $300,000, I'm going to go for the $310,000. In fact, I would be like, is this even a confident buyer at $300,000? Who knows? Exactly. you could even flip it and say if a buyer comes along and is like, I'm not getting title insurance, I'd be like, are you a competent buyer? Yeah,
exactly. Do you know what
do you care about this property? I'm going to go with the $310,000. But yeah, what's the next one?
The next one we have is home sale contingencies and also, closing of a sales contract, right? If you are out here looking to buy a home, right? Let's just say you have a home that you need to sell before you can purchase that home. What are you going to have to include in there? In the sale contract, if you can't afford it, if you can't afford to take out another mortgage and or pay in cash, right? You're going to need to put a contingency within your offer that states that, hey, either I need to list my home and my home needs to sell before I can move forward with this deal, and or the home that I already have listed that's under contract needs to close first before I can get approved, essentially.
And you said it funny one time because we were going under contract on a property. You're like, yeah, but this contingency is like contingency inception, because if I'm accepting a contract, I forget how you said it, but you're like, if I'm accepting a contract with a contingent on sale of my home, I'm taking on all the contingencies of that contract.
Yeah.
Right. And you just go down a whole contingency on sale. So it's kind of like, I'm accepting a buyer's offer, but it's contingent on sale of their home.
Right.
And their sales contingent on that buyer's contingent sale. You just go down a...
Yes,
so.
And as a seller,
Yeah.
right, you can see why that's unattractive, because you're sitting here looking at this number, okay, yeah, whatever the offer price is, but you have a contingency that if they don't sell their home, they're not buying mine. But we're going to be under contract for this time period, so no movement's going to be made unless they sell their home. What if it takes 2 months? What if it takes 3 months?
You're waiting even longer. What if something's discovered?
Right.
We had a... Sorry to cut you off.
Well, I was going to say, it's a little bit of a different story if the home's already under contract. But as the seller, and if, you have, a good agent, whoever's on your side, right, you better make sure that as the seller, they're digging in and seeing what status is this contract at, making sure that they're following along. That's exactly what happened to me in our last deal.
Oh,
right? I was in the process of helping clients sell their home, but they also needed that sale to purchase their new home. And we're on a very tight timeline, right? We're talking 3 weeks from the moment that they sold their house. Yep. To moving in, right? That agent, which was a good agent, right, was doing her due diligence before they even accepted the contract. Oh yeah. Making sure that all of those details were in line, because if they're going to make the move and accept this contract, they need to be confident that it's going to close.
And to that point, it's important, if you're selling your house, you got a buyer's agent come along and they're like, yeah, we got to sell my buyers have to sell their house in order for us to be able to pay for this property we're purchasing. If your seller agent or your listing agent doesn't go in depth on understanding the value of that property, if the property's not under contract, how easily is this property going to sell? I would almost ask that listing agent to do a comparative market analysis on that property. Make sure it's not overpriced. Make sure it's not going to sit there on the market forever. Check the market out, right? Is this property going to sell? And is it going to sell for the amount that they're trying to sell it at? Because those are two huge questions if you're taking on contingency of sale of their property. And then on top of that, if they're under contract and it's contingent on closing of their property, which means they're under contract, what does this contract look like?
Does this contract have an inspection contingency they're still in? Right? Yeah. Is there a
what
finance
level
contingency?
of the contract are we on? Yeah.
And all things that can cause that deal to fall apart. And if that deal falls apart, what's happening to your deal?
So what was your stat? You said that there was a stat on how many forget what the amount of contracts that fall through.
Yeah, so
what was that?
Last year, in December, about 40,000 home purchase agreements were canceled, which was about,
who knows, what is that? 16, and that's in the United States. Oh, what'd you say?
Yeah, it was 16.3% of the homes sold. That was up from almost 1.5% from the year before.
Which isn't surprising, right?
People are canceling their
So there's more
contracts.
cancelizations.
Yep, there are more contracts being canceled.
And that's not surprising, because you said there was an increase in inspections in general, so that's going to contribute to that.
Well, because less people are waiving these contingencies, meaning they are including them.
Yeah.
And because there are more contingencies included, that means deals are falling apart more frequently because of these contingencies.
And it could also be to the fact that we have these buyers from 2020 to 2025 more likely to not have a contingency, thus less likely to know about their own product, right? Because one big thing about the inspection contingencies, sorry to go back to the very beginning, but these inspectors, they walk buyers through the property, and they're not just there to identify things that need to be repaired. They educate,
Everything.
they educate their buyer on everything, opportunities as well. The regular inspector, I'm going to see them, tell their buyers more often. They're going to be like, hey, make sure you check this once a year. This is an issue that I've seen with properties with this product here. Check this. Looking at this, there's nothing wrong with it now, but I can see some possibilities there, right? Just different ideas. And that's a huge education towards a buyer.
And I think it's interesting too, especially for first-time home buyers, right? When you show them as an agent the report,
Oh, yeah.
right? You and I have seen hundreds, thousands of
like
reports, right?
Yeah, it's a shop.
They list everything. And there's so much
And it can be
information
scary,
on there.
yeah.
They look at that like, oh my gosh, everything is wrong with this house. But you have to also understand that chip in the electrical outlet, if the plastic is chipped, they're going to
bring it
note something like that.
Yeah,
right?
because they don't know for a fact. They're not taking it apart. Most inspectors aren't licensed electricians, so they're not going to come in and be like, this is an absolute fact about this issue. They're going to be like, from my experience, this is something that I've seen go wrong.
Might be a $5 fix.
Could be a $5 fix.
but they're still going to put it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And it loads up big time.
Again, are you going to let a deal fall apart over $5? Or maybe something along the line, if your furnace is outdated and close to breaking down.
Oh, yeah.
Something much more expensive than $5 that could definitely change your plans.
No, I get you. And so going back to the idea of digging into the other side of the property, make sure if the property hasn't gone under contract, make sure your seller investigates the likeliness of that property to sell and how quickly, and if it will sell for that price. If it's under contract, what stage of that contract is it in, right? Are we still under contingency of inspection? Then you get into the idea, if you're selling your old property, is the buyer, are they getting a loan, and are they eligible to get that loan? Are they going to run into issues there? How clean is that loan looking
How many
like, right?
hoops are you going to have to jump through
to
make sure this deal closes?
So, it's not the most common of contingencies, but it is important to recognize that, especially with a lot of these, I would argue, sellers that are about to get ready to move out of their property and downsize or something like that. It's super important to recognize three things, right? One, you're less attractive because you have a home to sell. Two, you're paying in cash, so you need the absolute cash from that home sale, right? And then three, you gotta weigh all these people that are coming in right now with these, because we got these downsizers and then we got these first-time home buyers, and they all want the same property. So you're coming into a really competitive area, right? And you as a downsizer or you as a buyer, a first-time home buyer, you're competing for the same property. When you as a downsizer come along and be like, I'm paying all cash. How about that? You like that? It's not as attractive because I got to get my cash from the sale of this property. And I might, that seller might prefer the traditional route of just selling their property to a person that's trying to get a loan, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something important to think about.
Especially when we're, in what we call the seller's market is
Oh, yeah.
truly when you see those negotiations happen, people waiving those contingencies because more buyers on one property, more offers to consider.
And it is funny to say that, you brought up seller's market. Right now, people are obviously saying it's buyer's market.
Absolutely.
There's more inventory than there is buyers. I've never liked these statistics. Personally, I hate the statistics because a buyer can become a buyer the next day. And how the heck do you track actual buyers? Sellers, it's a little bit easier to track them. Your property's on the market. You're trying to sell it. And it's a little bit more to get that property on the market if you decide to. But a buyer, I've been able to, send buyers to some of my trusted lenders and get them approved that evening, right? With some hustle. But even more so, a buyer doesn't even need to be approved to qualify. If you have a steady job and you have a good debt to income ratio and you don't have a pre-approval, I would still consider you an eligible buyer, right?
Absolutely.
I want to go see this property on Thursday. It's Tuesday. I'm going to get pre-approved in the meantime. I'm a buyer all of a sudden. So to say that it's a buyer's market because there aren't as many buyers as there are sellers, but then to go into the industry and when there's a good product out there, to see the amount of offers that go on our properties, that are coveted, right? We had a property for a buyer. She's looking in St. Charles right now. And there was a property she really liked. 15 offers. There was a bidding war of 15 offers. None of them were below asking price. So you say, oh, must be a seller's market, right? Even though they're like, no, it's a buyer's market. So I don't know.
Obviously, very location dependent, but I will say here in the next couple of months, it's going to be very fun.
Yeah. Very, very wise. Yeah. Very wise to get in touch with, if you don't have an agent, definitely reach out to our team. But if you do have an agent, I'm sure they'd 100% be happy to sit down with you and really dig into what inspection contingencies they probably have to put on and what inspection contingencies you can probably sacrifice. And then definitely speak to your lender as well. What kind of things are you going to want me to have on this contract? And what kind of things can we get out of the way? Little side note, I have lenders that can go fully underwritten. And what that means is they can almost get this person past pre-approval, almost in a way funded. So there's a rationality that they don't have to include an inspection or a financing contingency. Yeah. Cool things to think about. Not all lenders can do it. And it doesn't, if your lender can't do it, doesn't mean they're a bad lender. It just, these are options and sometimes they cost money. But all in all, definitely two most important people to think about when it comes to this is definitely your agent. Get an education on contingencies, which ones they'd recommend, have them explain to you so you can decide very strategically what you want to include and what you don't want to include. And then definitely talk to your lender because they're going to tell you the ones that you have to include, right? But yeah, anything else you got to add on?
I think that was a great one.
Cool. I mean, we keep talking about this, so definitely while we're wrapping up here, definitely reach out to us and consider putting in the chat or anything like that, personal message, if you want to personally talk to us about these details. We can educate you better. Or if you want us to do a whole nother episode digging into the in-depth of some of these contingencies where we weren't able to go into. Losing my words. Need some water. But yeah, what else you got for us? Good to wrap up?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bray Realty. You have wonderful
great
after day noon. Lovely. Nailed it. We practiced that 600 times. I'll see you.